Have you ever felt like you were living someone else's life? Like you were trapped in a system of expectations and obligations, unsure of who you really are or what you're meant to do? Imagine a world where there are no clear answers, no instructions on how to live, no preordained meaning to your existence. What if the only truth we could rely on was the freedom to create our own meaning, to define who we are, and to shape our lives through our choices? In today's video, we are diving deep into the mind of one of the most influential thinkers of the 20th century, Jean-Paul Sartre. His philosophy of existentialism challenged the foundations of society, art, literature, and human thought. Sartre told us that existence precedes essence, meaning that we are born without a purpose. And it is up to each one of us to create our own meaning in this chaotic and uncertain world. But with that freedom comes a heavy burden, the burden of responsibility. How does Sartre's existentialism apply to our modern lives? Can we find meaning in a world that offers none? And how can we embrace the freedom to choose without falling into despair or confusion? These questions have resonated with generations of thinkers, artists, and ordinary people alike. And they continue to be as relevant today as they were when Sartre first posed them. In this video, we'll explore Sartre's profound ideas on living authentically, embracing freedom, and taking responsibility for our lives. We'll take a look at how existentialism shaped literature, art, and culture, and how it continues to influence the way we see ourselves and the world around us. Before we dive in, if you enjoy this content and find these ideas as thought-provoking as I do, please consider giving this video a thumbs up, subscribing to the channel, and sharing it with anyone who might appreciate exploring existentialism in their own lives. And if you'd like to support the channel directly, feel free to donate through YouTube's Super Thanks. Every little bit helps to keep these conversations going. Now, let's get into Sartre's world of radical freedom, existential responsibility, and the quest for meaning. Buckle up, because this is going to be a journey that might just change the way you see yourself and the world around you. Existentialism, as a philosophical movement, emerged in the early 20th century and quickly became one of the most influential schools of thought. At its core, existentialism grapples with the fundamental question of what it means to exist. One of its most prominent proponents, Jean-Paul Sartre, is often regarded as the face of existentialism. Sartre's philosophy centers on the idea that life is inherently meaningless, and it is up to each individual to create meaning through their choices and actions. This is not a philosophy of despair, however. It is a call to embrace the freedom and responsibility that come with our existence. Sartre's existentialism challenges conventional beliefs about human nature, proposing that there is no predefined essence or purpose to our lives. In his famous assertion, existence precedes essence, Sartre suggests that individuals are not born with a purpose or a given identity. Rather, people are thrown into existence first and must define themselves through their actions. This radical freedom can be both exhilarating and terrifying. It strips away the comforting illusions that many cling to, forcing individuals to confront the terrifying reality that their lives are, in a sense, blank slates upon which they must write their own meaning. Sartre's philosophy is grounded in this understanding of existence. Humans are free, but this freedom comes with the burden of creating meaning in a world that offers none. The idea of the absurdity of existence, central to Sartre's philosophy, captures this tension between the human longing for meaning and the lack of inherent meaning in the world. For Sartre, the universe is indifferent to our existence. There is no divine being, no higher power, no objective moral framework that dictates the meaning of life. In fact, Sartre argues that the search for meaning in such a universe is absurd because meaning itself does not exist independently of the individual. In a world without objective purpose, each person must confront the reality of their existence and the question of what, if anything, makes their life worth living. Sartre's exploration of this absurdity is not a nihilistic resignation, but an invitation to embrace the freedom that comes with it. This confrontation with the absurdity of existence leads to a deep sense of anguish. Anguish, in Sartre's terms, is the feeling of existential anxiety that arises when one becomes aware of the weight of their freedom. The recognition that we are completely free to shape our own lives, and that this freedom comes with the responsibility to choose and define ourselves, can be overwhelming. Anguish is not simply a fleeting moment of doubt or confusion. It is a profound existential awareness of the responsibility that comes with being human. The freedom to choose is liberating, but also carries with it the burden of accountability. Each choice we make reflects who we are and who we are becoming, and there is no one else to blame if things go wrong. For many people, this realization of freedom can be paralyzing. It is much easier to live in bad faith, Sartre argues, and to deny the responsibility that comes with our freedom. Bad faith is a form of self-deception where individuals hide from their freedom and responsibility by adhering to social roles or external expectations. Instead of confronting the truth of their own freedom, people often choose to live as if their lives are predetermined, or as if they have no control over their actions. This is where Sartre's existentialism becomes particularly radical. It requires individuals to confront the fact that they are responsible for their own existence, and that any external justifications, whether social, cultural, or religious, are ultimately forms of escape from the true responsibility of freedom. One example of this can be seen in the way people often adhere to societal expectations regarding career and family. Imagine a person who follows the traditional path of getting a stable job, marrying, and having children, not because they genuinely desire these things, but because society expects it. They may live their lives in a way that conforms to external definitions of success, but Sartre would argue that this is a life lived in bad faith. Such an individual has not taken ownership of their freedom. Instead, they have allowed external forces to define their essence. Sartre's existentialism, in contrast, encourages individuals to reflect deeply on what they truly want out of life and to make choices that reflect their authentic desires, not the expectations imposed by others. The anguish that comes with recognizing our freedom and responsibility is not something that can be easily avoided. Sartre suggests that this recognition is an unavoidable part of the human condition. The question, then, is how we deal with this anguish. One way is to embrace it fully, to acknowledge that life is not predetermined, that we are free, and that we must take responsibility for our choices. Sartre's philosophy encourages individuals to live authentically, to make choices based on their own values rather than external pressures. This is where Sartre's ideas align with a more empowering, optimistic view of freedom. While the recognition of freedom may initially be unsettling, it also offers a profound opportunity for self-creation and self-determination. Living authentically means acknowledging the absurdity of existence and choosing to act in a way that is true to oneself, regardless of the external circumstances or societal expectations. Sartre's existentialism encourages individuals to reject the comforting illusions of predetermined roles and instead face the raw reality of existence. This doesn't mean rejecting all social norms or responsibilities, but rather living in a way that is true to one's own values and desires. In Sartre's view, the ultimate challenge of human existence is not to avoid anguish or freedom, but to embrace them fully. Life, in all its absurdity, offers us the opportunity to create meaning for ourselves. Rather than passively accepting the meaning given to us by society, religion, or culture, Sartre's existentialism urges us to take active responsibility for our lives and choices. This is where Sartre's philosophy can be both liberating and daunting. It frees us from the constraints of a predetermined world, but also forces us to confront the weight of our own decisions. The absurdity of existence is not something to be feared or rejected, but something to be embraced. It It is the condition that allows us to create our own purpose, to shape our lives in a way that reflects who we truly are. Sartre's philosophy invites us to step into the freedom of our own existence, to accept the anguish that comes with it, and to live authentically in a world that offers no inherent meaning. In conclusion, Sartre's exploration of the absurdity of existence, the anguish that accompanies freedom, and the responsibility of self-creation are central to his existentialist philosophy. His ideas challenge individuals to confront the reality of their freedom and responsibility, urging them to live authentically in a world that offers no predefined meaning. Sartre's existentialism is not a call for despair, but a call for empowerment, an invitation to take ownership of our lives and to create our own meaning in a world that is, by nature, devoid of it. Through this process of self-creation, Sartre suggests we can find purpose and meaning not because the world provides it, but because we as free individuals choose to create it for ourselves. Sartre's existential philosophy is centered around a revolutionary idea: existence precedes essence. This phrase encapsulates the belief that human beings are not born with a predefined essence or purpose. Instead, people exist first, and through their actions and choices, they create their essence, their meaning, and their identity. For Sartre, this is both a liberating and daunting idea, one that strips away the comforting notion that life has an inherent meaning or purpose that we are destined to fulfill. It places the responsibility of defining one's life entirely on the individual. Sartre's radical rejection of the traditional idea of essence is key to his existentialism. In traditional thinking, particularly within religious or essentialist frameworks, human beings are often seen as possessing a fixed nature, an essence that defines their purpose and behavior. For instance, many religious beliefs propose that humans are created by a higher power with a specific purpose. Similarly, in essentialist philosophies, an individual is seen as born with certain attributes that determine their role in life. Sartre, however, fundamentally disagrees with this perspective. He argues that human beings are born into the world with no predetermined nature, no blueprint or guidebook that tells them who they are or what they should become. This lack of an inherent essence means that individuals must constantly make choices to define themselves. Existence precedes essence means that humans are thrown into existence first and must create meaning and identity through their actions. Sartre uses the example of a paper cutter to illustrate this concept. A paper cutter, he argues, has an essence that precedes its existence. It is made to cut paper, and this purpose is determined by its designer. The paper cutter's essence is defined by its intended function. Humans, on the other hand, do not have this luxury. A person is not born with a set role or purpose. They are thrown into the world and must create their own purpose through their choices and actions. Sartre believed that this freedom to define one's essence was what made human beings uniquely human. Unlike objects, which have an inherent function or purpose, human beings are not defined by an essence, but must create their own. This idea challenges the traditional notion of a universal human nature. If essence were to precede existence, it would imply that there are certain qualities or characteristics shared by all humans. But Sartre rejects this notion and asserts that human beings are individuals, each with the freedom to define who they are. This idea not only denies any universal moral truth, but also places a profound responsibility on each person. Since we are not born with a defined essence, we are responsible for defining ourselves. Every action we take, every choice we make, is a reflection of who we are and who we are becoming. In this way, Sartre's philosophy emphasizes the importance of personal freedom. Freedom, however, is not just the ability to choose among various options. It is the freedom to create ourselves. It is the responsibility to define our lives, make decisions, and create meaning, even in a world that offers no predetermined guide. This freedom is both liberating and burdensome. The human condition, according to Sartre, is marked by this paradox. We are condemned to be free. We have the freedom to choose our paths. But that very freedom comes with the burden of responsibility for our choices. One of the central aspects of Sartre's philosophy is the idea of authenticity. Living authentically means acknowledging and embracing this radical freedom, not allowing ourselves to be defined by others or by society's expectations. Authenticity, in Sartre's view, requires individuals to take ownership of their lives and to live in a way that reflects their true desires and values. It means living in accordance with one's own ideals rather than adhering to external standards or conforming to societal roles. For example, many individuals live their lives based on the expectations of their families, communities, or cultures. They may choose careers, relationships, or lifestyles not because they align with their personal values, but because they feel obligated to meet societal standards or please others. Sartre would argue that this is inauthentic living. Such individuals are not taking responsibility for their freedom to choose. They're simply following the prescribed paths laid out for them by others. To live authentically, Sartre suggests, means to reflect on one's values and desires and to make decisions that are true to oneself, even if those decisions go against societal norms or expectations. Take, for instance, the example of someone who chooses a career in medicine because their parents are doctors and expect them to follow the family tradition. This individual might have a deep love for art or teaching, but feels pressure to pursue medicine due to familial expectations. Sartre would argue that this person is not living authentically because they are not embracing their own freedom and desires. Instead, they are allowing external influences to dictate their life choices. To live authentically, they must recognize their freedom and take responsibility for their choices. They must ask themselves what they truly want out of life and pursue a path that aligns with their own values, even if it means stepping outside the boundaries of their family's expectations. Living authentically also requires individuals to confront the existential reality that life has no inherent meaning. In a world without a predefined essence, people must create their own meaning through their actions and decisions. Sartre emphasizes that we are responsible for creating the meaning of our lives. There is no external guide or ultimate purpose to life. It is up to each individual to define what matters. This is a profoundly empowering notion because it places the control over one's life in the hands of the individual. It means that individuals are free to choose their values, their goals, and their sense of purpose without relying on external sources to tell them what is important. However, with this freedom comes the burden of responsibility. As Sartre suggests, freedom is not simply the ability to choose between different options. It is the responsibility to make choices that shape our lives and define our essence. In other words, we must continuously choose who we are and what we want to become. There is no moment of arrival, no point at which we can stop and say, "This is who I am." Instead, life is an ongoing process of choice and self-creation. Sartre also addresses the burden of responsibility in the context of how individuals relate to others. Each person, in Sartre's view, is not an isolated being, but exists in relation to others. Our actions and choices not only define who we are, but also have an impact on the lives of those around us. Sartre uses the concept of the look to explain how the gaze of others influences our sense of self. When we are aware of others looking at us, we become aware of the fact that our actions are being judged by others. This awareness can lead to a sense of alienation, as we begin to feel that we are being defined by others rather than by ourselves. To live authentically, Sartre suggests, means to be aware of the influence of others, but not to allow their judgments to determine our actions. We must remain true to our own values and desires, regardless of how others perceive us. The burden of responsibility is also evident in the way Sartre discusses the concept of bad faith. Bad faith refers to the act of denying or escaping one's responsibility and freedom. It is a form of self-deception where individuals refuse to acknowledge the reality of their freedom and instead adopt fixed roles or identities. For example, a person who continuously blames others for their circumstances or refuses to take responsibility for their actions is living in bad faith. Sartre's existentialism calls on individuals to confront their freedom and responsibility head-on and to reject the comforting illusions of bad faith. One example of bad faith can be seen in the way many people live their lives according to external expectations. Consider someone who stays in a job they dislike because they believe they should stay in that job due to the pressure of societal norms or the expectations of others. Sartre would argue that this person is living in bad faith because they're not taking responsibility for their own desires and freedom. They're allowing the external world to dictate their actions, rather than acknowledging their own power to choose. The burden of responsibility, then, is not just about making choices, it is about recognizing and embracing the freedom that comes with those choices. It is about understanding that our lives are not predetermined by fate, biology, or societal norms. Instead, we are free to create our own essence through our actions, and we are responsible for the consequences of those actions. This understanding of freedom and responsibility is what makes Sartre's existentialism both liberating and terrifying. It calls on individuals to confront the reality of their existence, to embrace their freedom, and to take full responsibility for the lives they create. Jean-Paul Sartre's concept of bad faith, or mauvaise foi in French, is one of the most powerful and challenging elements of his existentialist philosophy. It refers to the act of self-deception, where individuals deny their freedom, responsibility, and the authenticity of their existence by accepting false or misleading interpretations of their lives. In Sartre's view, bad faith occurs when people refuse to confront the fundamental truth of their existence that they are free to choose and must bear the responsibility for their choices. Instead, they escape this uncomfortable truth by adopting predetermined roles, external justifications, or societal expectations that allow them to avoid the burden of existential freedom. At its core, bad faith is the refusal to acknowledge one's own freedom and the responsibility that comes with it. It involves living in denial of the fact that we are not bound by external forces, but rather, we are free to create our own essence through the choices we make. Sartre explains that individuals often fall into bad faith because the freedom to make choices is terrifying. The realization that life has no inherent meaning and that we must create our own meaning through our actions can be overwhelming. It is much easier to convince ourselves that we have no control over our circumstances and that our lives are shaped by forces beyond our control. In Sartre's view, bad faith is a form of self-deception that allows individuals to escape the anguish and responsibility of their freedom. People who live in bad faith are not fully aware of their own power to choose and create meaning in their lives. Instead, they hide behind socially constructed roles, routines, or identities that give them the illusion of certainty and stability. They rely on the idea that their behavior is dictated by social expectations, cultural norms, or external circumstances, rather than recognizing that they are actively choosing how to live and define themselves. One classic example Sartre uses to illustrate bad faith is that of a woman on a date who, when asked by her companion whether she would like to go for a walk, hesitates, instead of answering truthfully or making a decision based on her own desires. She chooses to interpret the situation in a way that avoids taking responsibility for her actions. She convinces herself that she cannot go for a walk because it might be too cold outside, or because the situation isn't quite right. This woman is in bad faith because she is not willing to accept the freedom she has to make a choice in the moment. Instead, she deflects the responsibility onto external conditions, choosing to live according to external limitations rather than taking ownership of her freedom to decide. Bad faith can also manifest in other ways. such as when someone stays in a job they hate because they feel trapped by financial obligations or societal expectations. Many people fall into the trap of believing that their circumstances are fixed, that they have no choice but to stay in a job that does not bring them fulfillment. They may tell themselves, "I have a family to support," or "I can't afford to quit," using these external reasons as justifications for their actions. However, Sartre would argue that this person is living in bad faith. While it may be true that they face certain practical constraints, they're ultimately avoiding the recognition that they have the freedom to make different choices. In fact, even in the face of responsibility or hardship, they retain the freedom to pursue alternative paths, whether that means seeking a new job, changing their lifestyle, or taking risks in order to live more authentically. The tendency to live in bad faith is deeply ingrained in society. Our social structures and institutions often encourage people to conform to established norms and expectations. From a young age, individuals are taught to follow the rules, adhere to societal values, and fit into predefined roles. We are expected to pursue certain careers, get married, have children, and live up to the expectations of our families and communities. Many people internalize these societal pressures and adopt roles that are not necessarily aligned with their authentic desires. For instance, a person might go into a career in law because their parents expect it, even though they have no personal interest in the field. This individual is engaging in bad faith because they're choosing to live according to an external narrative, rather than making decisions based on their own values and desires. One of the most striking examples of bad faith can be seen in the way people justify their actions by deflecting responsibility onto external factors. Consider someone who blames their unhappiness on external circumstances, such as their job, their partner, or their upbringing. They might say things like, "I would be happier if I had a better job," or "If only my partner treated me differently, I would be content." These are all examples of bad faith because they deny the person's responsibility for their own happiness. While it is true that external factors can influence our well-being, Sartre would argue that individuals still have the power to choose how they respond to those factors. By placing the blame on external sources, the person is avoiding the difficult truth that they are ultimately responsible for how they experience life and for the choices they make. Another common example of bad faith is when people follow social scripts without questioning them. Take, for instance, the practice of blindly following a career path because it is expected, even though it doesn't align with the individual's passions or interests. Many people live out a predetermined story written by society, where success is measured by money, prestige, and social status. This is a form of bad faith because the person is conforming to an external standard, rather than creating a life that reflects their own values and desires. Instead of embracing their freedom to create a meaningful life, they allow societal expectations to define their worth. The consequences of living in bad faith are profound and far-reaching. Sartre argues that bad faith leads to a life that is an inauthentic one, that is lived according to the expectations and definitions of others rather than one's own desires. When people live in bad faith, they fail to engage with the reality of their own freedom and responsibility. They do not acknowledge the fact that they are free to choose, and instead, they rely on external justifications to escape from the anxiety and responsibility of making decisions. In this way, bad faith prevents individuals from living fully, from realizing their true potential, and from experiencing the richness of life that comes with taking responsibility for one's choices. Living in bad faith also leads to a sense of alienation. By denying their freedom and responsibility, individuals cut themselves off from their true selves. They may feel disconnected from their own desires and values, and instead, they become trapped in a cycle of self-deception. This alienation can manifest in feelings of frustration, dissatisfaction, and confusion. People who live in bad faith may experience a sense of emptiness because they are not living authentically. They may feel that their lives lack purpose or meaning. But this sense of emptiness is a direct result of their refusal to engage with the freedom they have to create meaning for themselves. Furthermore, bad faith can stifle personal growth. When individuals refuse to take responsibility for their actions and choices, they remain stagnant. They avoid confronting their own limitations and weaknesses, choosing instead to live in denial. As a result, they miss opportunities for self-improvement, personal growth, and self-actualization. Sartre believed that true freedom and fulfillment come from embracing one's responsibility, from facing the anguish of freedom, and from making conscious, deliberate choices that align with one's authentic self. Living in bad faith, on the other hand, keeps individuals locked in a cycle of self-deception and inauthenticity. The avoidance of responsibility and freedom can also perpetuate societal problems. If people are unwilling to confront their own freedom and responsibility, they are less likely to take action to address social injustices or to challenge harmful societal norms. Bad faith, in this sense, becomes a barrier to personal and collective progress. It allows individuals to remain passive and complicit in systems that perpetuate inequality, exploitation, and oppression. By living in bad faith, people deny their power to change the world and to create a more just and meaningful society. Ultimately, Sartre's concept of bad faith serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of personal responsibility and authenticity. To live authentically, we must confront the uncomfortable reality that we are free to choose and that we must bear the consequences of our actions. This is not an easy task, as it requires individuals to give up the comforting illusions that bad faith provides. But by embracing our freedom, taking responsibility for our lives, and living in accordance with our true desires, we can break free from the trap of bad faith and live lives that are truly our own. The consequences of living authentically are far-reaching, leading to a deeper sense of fulfillment, personal growth, and connection with the world around us. In contrast, the consequences of bad faith are alienation, stagnation, and a life that is lived according to others' definitions rather than one's own. Sartre's existentialist philosophy emphasizes the idea that existence precedes essence, suggesting that individuals are not born with a predefined purpose or meaning. Instead, they must create meaning through their own choices and actions. This radical freedom to define one's life can be both liberating and daunting, especially when faced with a world that seems inherently meaningless. For many, the quest for meaning in a universe that offers no inherent guidance can feel like an overwhelming challenge. However, Sartre's philosophy offers a roadmap for living authentically in such a world, urging individuals to embrace their freedom, make conscious choices, and take full responsibility for their lives. Living authentically, in Sartre's view, means acknowledging the reality that life does not come with a predetermined script or a universal purpose. In a world that seems indifferent or even hostile to human existence, Sartre suggests that the way to live authentically is not to seek external validation or predefined roles, but to create one's essence through action. Living authentically requires individuals to face the uncomfortable truth that they are free, and that with this freedom comes a responsibility to create meaning in their own lives. It involves accepting that we are not mere objects subject to the will of others or to fate, but subjects who can define ourselves through the choices we make. Practical application of Sartre's philosophy in everyday life means actively engaging in the process of self-creation. It's about refusing to passively accept the roles or identities imposed by others, whether by society, family, or culture, and instead making choices that reflect one's true values and desires. In practice, this can mean many things. For instance, in the context of work, Sartre might suggest that an individual who feels trapped in a soul-crushing job should not simply accept the situation as unchangeable, nor should they blindly follow the expectations of others. Rather, they must confront their situation and ask themselves what they truly want from their career. The individual may choose to seek a different job, pursue a passion, or take risks that align with their authentic desires. This process of living authentically is not necessarily about radical changes or grand gestures, but about making deliberate decisions that reflect one's true self, even in small ways. For example, someone may feel constrained by the social pressure to marry at a certain age or to have children. And while these things may be fulfilling for some, they may not align with their values. Living authentically would mean acknowledging this and making decisions based on personal desires and values, not societal expectations. This decision could involve difficult conversations with family or friends, but in Sartre's view, the ultimate goal is not to conform, but to create a life that reflects who you truly are. However, the journey to live authentically is not without its challenges. One of the major challenges people face when searching for meaning in a world that lacks inherent purpose is the fear of uncertainty. The recognition that there is no universal meaning or blueprint for life can be paralyzing. People may feel lost or unsure about their direction, especially when societal norms and expectations seem to provide more comfort and clarity than the idea of creating one's meaning from scratch. Sartre recognized this existential anxiety, calling it anguish. This feeling arises when individuals realize the full weight of their freedom and the responsibility that comes with it. The burden of having to create one's life from nothing, without relying on external validation or predetermined roles, can be overwhelming. Take, for example, someone who is in a long-term relationship and feels the pressure to conform to the expectation of marriage, even though they are uncertain about whether this is the right path for them. The fear of uncertainty of being judged by society, family, or even their partner can make it difficult to make a decision that is in alignment with their true self. This fear is a natural reaction to the recognition that they are free to choose their path. But it also shows how existential anxiety can paralyze individuals from making choices that are authentic to themselves. It's easier to choose the familiar route that aligns with societal expectations rather than confront the discomfort of making an individual choice. Moreover, finding meaning in an apparently meaningless world also involves grappling with the constant pressure to live up to societal standards of success and happiness. Many people live their lives based on what others expect of them, pursuing careers, relationships, and lifestyles that are considered desirable by external standards, but not necessarily aligned with their own values. This phenomenon can be seen clearly in the world of social media, where people often present a curated version of their lives that conforms to societal ideals of beauty, success, and happiness. This can create a distorted sense of reality and lead people to feel as though they are failing in their own lives if they do not live up to these ideals. Sartre would argue that this pursuit of external validation is a form of bad faith, as it prevents individuals from acknowledging their freedom to create their own essence and meaning. Sartre's philosophy provides a framework for breaking free from these societal pressures by encouraging individuals to take ownership of their lives. The idea that we must create our own meaning is daunting, but it also gives us the freedom to define what success, happiness, and fulfillment truly mean for us as individuals. For example, someone may decide to leave behind a career in finance to pursue a passion for painting or writing. This decision may not align with societal ideals of success, but it is a reflection of the individual's authentic desires. Sartre's philosophy suggests that by embracing our freedom to choose and by making decisions that reflect our true values, we can find meaning and fulfillment, even in a world that seems to offer none. At the heart of Sartre's existentialism is the importance of making choices and taking responsibility for those choices. Sartre emphasizes that we are not passive objects shaped by external forces, but active agents who must continually make decisions about who we are and who we want to be. The act of choosing is central to creating meaning in our lives. Every choice we make, no matter how small, reflects our essence and shapes the person we are becoming. Sartre argues that this constant process of choosing is what gives our lives meaning. The key is to make those choices consciously and with awareness of the freedom and responsibility they entail. For instance, consider a person who is faced with a difficult decision, such as whether to pursue a career opportunity that would require moving to a different city. The decision may come with many uncertainties, and the person may feel torn between staying in their current comfort zone or venturing into the unknown. Sartre would argue that the individual must embrace the freedom to choose and recognize that they have the power to define their life through this decision. The individual must take responsibility for the consequences of their choice, whether it leads to success or failure. There is no external authority to dictate what the right decision is. The decision must be made based on the individual's own values, desires, and sense of self. This concept of taking responsibility for our choices extends to all aspects of life. Sartre rejects the idea that we can blame others or external circumstances for the choices we make. In his view, we are always responsible for our actions, and even when we are faced with difficult or uncomfortable situations, we must acknowledge that we have the freedom to choose how to respond. In practical terms, this means that individuals must stop relying on excuses or external justifications for their actions. Rather than blaming others, society, or circumstances, individuals must take ownership of their decisions and accept the consequences, whether positive or negative. In a world that often feels chaotic and uncertain, making decisions can be daunting. However, Sartre's existentialism encourages us to embrace the freedom and responsibility that come with the act of choosing. Living authentically involves making conscious, deliberate decisions that align with our true values and desires. It is about acknowledging the power we have to shape our own lives and the responsibility we bear for the choices we make. While this process can be uncomfortable and full of uncertainty, it is also the path to finding meaning and fulfillment in a world that offers no inherent purpose. Ultimately, Sartre's philosophy teaches us that we are not defined by external expectations or predetermined roles, but by the choices we make and the actions we take. In a meaningless world, it is through our own decisions and our acceptance of responsibility that we create meaning. The challenge, then, is not to search for meaning in external sources, but to create it ourselves through the choices we make. This freedom to choose is both a privilege and a responsibility, one that allows us to live authentically and find purpose in an otherwise indifferent universe. Existentialism, as a philosophical movement, has had a profound impact on a wide range of disciplines, from art and literature to culture at large. Its exploration of themes like individual freedom, the search for meaning, and the absurdity of existence resonated deeply with writers, artists, and thinkers throughout the 20th century. The power of existentialism lies in its challenge to traditional ideas of morality, identity, and meaning, urging individuals to confront their own existence and responsibility. Its influence is not confined to the philosophical domain, but stretches far beyond, shaping creative expression, cultural movements, and even modern-day discourse. Through existentialism, we see how philosophy can extend its reach into the arts and society, reflecting the need for personal authenticity and an ever-changing understanding of human existence. In literature, existentialism provided a framework for authors to grapple with the meaning of life in an increasingly fragmented world. The works of existentialist writers like Albert Camus, Franz Kafka, and Samuel Beckett captured the disillusionment and alienation of modern life, offering a stark look at human existence without the comforting illusions of religion or traditional values. Camus, The Stranger, for example, centers on Massault, a man detached from the conventional meanings of life and his ultimate realization that existence is indifferent to him. This indifference to the individual is at the heart of existentialist thought, where the universe is seen as chaotic and meaningless. Camus' exploration of the absurdity of life and the individual's role in confronting that absurdity has made The Stranger a key text in existentialist literature. Sartre's own works, such as Nausea and Being and Nothingness, further deepened existentialism's literary influence. Sartre's focus on the individual's freedom, choice, and responsibility sparked interest in exploring characters who confront their existential dilemmas and seek to assert control over their lives, despite the seeming meaninglessness of existence. In Nausea, Sartre explores the sense of alienation felt by the protagonist, Roquenin, who experiences a profound detachment from the world around him. Through existential philosophy, Sartre gives voice to the internal struggles of individuals who are forced to navigate the lack of objective meaning in their lives. These works illustrate how literature can serve as a vehicle for exploring deep philosophical questions and provide a form of personal liberation through self-reflection. Art, too, was profoundly impacted by existentialism. The existentialist ethos of confronting one's own existence, the recognition of the absurd, and the questioning of traditional values permeated visual arts, music, and theater. In the world of visual arts, the existentialist movement inspired artists to reflect the inner turmoil and alienation of the individual. In the post-World War II period, the surrealists and abstract expressionists, such as Jackson Pollock and Jean Dubuffet, began to emphasize raw, emotional expression that mirrored existential concerns. Pollock's chaotic splatter paintings, for example, can be seen as representations of the uncontrollable nature of existence, where form and structure break down to reveal the absurdity of life. The disordered patterns in his work can be interpreted as an artistic expression of Sartre's idea that humans are free to create their own meaning, but do so within a world that does not provide inherent structure. Similarly, existentialist themes have also made their mark in theater. The absurdist plays of Samuel Beckett, particularly Waiting for Godot, illustrate the human condition in a world devoid of clear meaning or direction. The play follows two characters, Vladimir and Estragon, who are stuck in a seemingly meaningless routine of waiting for someone who never arrives. The absurdity of their situation mirrors existentialist philosophies' focus on the search for meaning in a universe that offers none. Beckett's minimalist style, along with the circular, repetitive nature of the dialogue, highlights the futility of existence while simultaneously drawing attention to the importance of human resilience and the persistence of hope, even in the face of meaninglessness. In the realm of music, existentialism has influenced artists who convey the angst and disillusionment of modern life. The genre of punk rock, for instance, with its rebellious attitudes and disdain for societal norms, embodies existentialist themes. Bands like The Clash and the Sex Pistols sang about alienation, disillusionment with authority, and the rejection of prescribed identities. The raw, unfiltered energy of punk aligns with Sartre's call for individuals to define their own existence, free from the constraints of societal expectations. Beyond art, existentialism has resonated across generations, influencing the way people think about their lives, purpose, and societal roles. The existentialist call for self-examination and the creation of personal meaning has become particularly relevant in an era marked by rapid change, globalization, and increasing uncertainty. In the mid-20th century, existentialism provided a philosophical response to the horrors of war, the rise of totalitarianism, and the collapse of traditional religious and political structures. Its emphasis on individual freedom and personal responsibility offered a way to confront the chaos and alienation of modern life and to assert agency in the face of existential dread. Existentialist ideas became particularly prominent in the intellectual climate of the 1960s, during a time of widespread social upheaval and questioning of established norms. The youth movement, civil rights struggles, and anti-war protests were all fueled, in part, by the existentialist ethos of rejecting conformity and embracing personal freedom. Thinkers like Sartre, Simone de Beauvoir, and Herbert Marcuse became voices of resistance against authoritarianism, consumerism, and the alienation of modern life. The ideas that Sartre espoused about individual freedom and social responsibility spoke directly to a generation seeking to break free from the constraints of the past and shape a new future. The impact of existentialism has extended to popular culture as well. Movies, books, and television shows often deal with themes of existential angst, individualism, and the search for meaning. One of the most well-known examples in popular culture is the film The Matrix, where the protagonist, Neo, embarks on a journey of self-discovery and realizes that the reality he has been living in is an illusion. This theme of breaking free from an artificial, predetermined reality mirrors Sartre's belief in the importance of questioning the world around us and rejecting false notions of meaning. The idea of living authentically, creating one's own essence, and confronting the absurdity of life has been widely reflected in films that explore personal identity, freedom, and the consequences of choice. In the present day, existentialism continues to offer insight into the challenges of modern life. In a world increasingly defined by technology, consumerism, and social media, many people feel disconnected from their authentic selves, struggling to navigate a digital landscape that constantly imposes external values and expectations. The rise of social media, in particular, has created new forms of existential pressure, as individuals are often compelled to curate their lives in ways that align with societal standards of beauty, success, and happiness. Existentialism's emphasis on personal authenticity, responsibility, and a rejection of external definitions of identity remains a powerful antidote to the pressures of modern life. The rapid development of technology and the increasing dominance of a consumer-driven economy have also heightened feelings of alienation, a central theme in existentialism. The rise of automation and artificial intelligence, for example, has made many people question their place in the world. What is the purpose of human labor in an increasingly automated society? Sartre's existentialism can provide a framework for responding to these challenges by emphasizing the importance of making choices and defining one's own meaning in a world where traditional roles and structures are being upended. The pursuit of authenticity, living according to one's true values, rather than external pressures, remains a central tenet of existential thought in a world that continues to evolve at breakneck speed. Today, existentialism's relevance is seen in the increasing number of people turning to philosophy and self-exploration to navigate the complexities of modern life. The struggles of finding meaning in a world that often seems indifferent to human existence are echoed in existentialist thought, which calls individuals to engage in the difficult but necessary work of creating meaning through their actions. This call to live authentically, to confront one's own freedom and responsibility, and to find personal meaning in a world that does not offer it freely, remains one of the most enduring aspects of existentialism. In conclusion, existentialism has had a profound influence on art, literature, culture, and modern-day life. Its emphasis on individual freedom, responsibility, and the search for meaning has resonated with generations of thinkers, artists, and individuals who have grappled with the challenges of modern existence. From literature to music, from social movements to popular culture, existentialism has provided a framework for understanding the human condition and for exploring how individuals can create meaning in a world that offers none. Its relevance today is more apparent than ever, as people continue to confront existential challenges in a rapidly changing world. Jean-Paul Sartre's legacy as a philosopher, writer, and intellectual is one that continues to reverberate throughout modern thought. His existentialist philosophy, with its emphasis on individual freedom, responsibility, and the search for meaning in an indifferent universe, has left an indelible mark on a wide array of disciplines, from literature and art to psychology and political theory. Sartre's exploration of existential themes, such as the absurdity of existence, the weight of human freedom, and the idea of creating one's own essence, continues to inspire debates, critiques, and reinterpretations. His impact on the intellectual landscape is profound, yet it is also complex, with his ideas continuing to be contested, refined, and reimagined by thinkers around the world. Sartre's most significant legacy lies in his challenge to traditional views of human nature, existence, and morality. In the mid-20th century, his ideas about the radical freedom of the individual and the necessity of taking responsibility for one's choices offered a stark contrast to the deterministic and essentialist philosophies that preceded him. For Sartre, the human condition was defined by freedom, and it was within this freedom that individuals could define themselves and create meaning. Unlike the religious or essentialist doctrines that posited a divine plan or a set of inherent characteristics that dictated one's life, Sartre argued that human beings are thrown into existence without any predetermined purpose, and it is up to each individual to create meaning through their actions. Sartre's call to embrace freedom and responsibility challenged individuals to confront the complexities of their existence. His work encouraged people to question the societal norms, cultural values, and roles that often shape their lives without their conscious awareness. For Sartre, this freedom was both empowering and burdensome. It meant that people could no longer rely on external authorities or frameworks to dictate their choices. Instead, they had to take full responsibility for their actions and their consequences. This notion of radical freedom was particularly influential in a time when traditional structures of authority were being called into question, particularly in the aftermath of the World Wars and the social upheaval of the 1960s. In literature, Sartre's existentialist ideas have had a profound impact on both the form and content of modern fiction. His novels, plays, and philosophical essays were not only theoretical exercises, but also literary works that explored the inner lives of characters grappling with freedom, isolation, and authenticity. Sartre's work helped to establish existentialism as a central theme in 20th century literature, influencing writers such as Albert Camus, Simone de Beauvoir, and Samuel Beckett. His play No Exit, which presents a scenario in which three individuals are trapped in a room for eternity, confronts the existential tension between individual freedom and the way in which people are often imprisoned by their own choices and the expectations of others. Sartre's exploration of bad faith and the existential anguish of living in a world without inherent meaning continues to influence contemporary literature, where characters often struggle to find their own identity and purpose in an increasingly fragmented and chaotic world. Art also felt the influence of Sartre's existentialism, particularly in the post-World War II era, when artists sought to reflect the alienation and disillusionment of modern life. Abstract expressionists like Jackson Pollock and Franz Kline, for example, emphasized emotional rawness and the individual's experience of freedom and uncertainty. Sartre's insistence on the importance of the individual's subjective experience of existence resonated with artists who were exploring the depths of personal expression. Similarly, in theater, the absurdist plays of Samuel Beckett, especially Waiting for Godot, mirrored Sartre's ideas about the absurdity of existence and the tension between freedom and meaninglessness. The disjointed is not without controversy. His ideas have sparked ongoing debates and interpretations that continue to shape how his work is understood today. One of the key points of contention in Sartre's philosophy is his notion of radical freedom. Sartre argued that humans are condemned to be free, meaning that we have no choice but to choose and to define ourselves through our actions. This freedom, however, is not always liberating. It is fraught with anguish, as it places the responsibility for one's choices squarely on the individual. Critics have often pointed out the potential dangers of this radical freedom. For example, some argue that Sartre's emphasis on individual autonomy can lead to a form of existential solipsism, where individuals are left to navigate the world without the support of shared values or ethical frameworks. In a world where everyone is free to create their own meaning, how can we establish a common sense of morality or social justice? Sartre's solution to this problem was to argue that freedom comes with the responsibility to engage with others and to respect their freedom as well. Yet, this solution has not satisfied all critics, who have questioned whether Sartre's philosophy is truly capable of providing a coherent ethical system. Another ongoing debate centers on Sartre's political philosophy, particularly his engagement with Marxism. Sartre was deeply involved in political activism throughout his life, and he saw existentialism as a tool for challenging oppressive systems and fostering human liberation. However, his relationship with Marxism was complicated. While Sartre admired Marx's critique of capitalist exploitation and oppression, he was critical of the rigid, deterministic aspects of Marxist thought. Sartre's brand of existentialism, which emphasizes individual freedom and the importance of personal responsibility, sometimes clashed with the Marxist focus on historical materialism and class struggle. Over time, Sartre became increasingly disillusioned with Soviet-style communism and sought to reconcile his existentialist philosophy with his political commitments. In the late 20th century, his work on Marxism and existentialism prompted renewed debates about the relationship between individual freedom and collective social change. Sartre's legacy is also marked by the influence of his feminist writings. In his collaboration with Simone de Beauvoir, Sartre helped shape existential feminism, particularly in The Second Sex, where de Beauvoir explored the existential situation of women in a patriarchal society. Sartre's philosophy of freedom and responsibility played a significant role in de Beauvoir's arguments for women's liberation, emphasizing the need for women to assert their freedom and reject the societal roles that confine them. Sartre's own work, particularly his insistence on the necessity of rejecting imposed identities, provided a philosophical foundation for feminist thinkers who sought to challenge the cultural and political structures that oppressed women. Despite these debates and critiques, Sartre's influence on contemporary thought remains profound. His exploration of freedom, responsibility, and the search for meaning has become more relevant than ever in today's world. In an age where many feel alienated by rapid technological advances, consumerism, and social fragmentation, Sartre's existentialism offers a framework for understanding the complexities of modern existence. His focus on personal freedom and the responsibility that comes with it encourages individuals to take ownership of their lives and to confront the challenges of living in an increasingly chaotic and uncertain world. Sartre's philosophy urges us to reject easy answers and superficial solutions and to engage with the complexities of our own existence. In conclusion, Sartre's legacy as a philosopher, writer, and thinker is one that has profoundly shaped the way we understand the human condition. His ideas about individual freedom, responsibility, and the creation of meaning have had a lasting impact on art, literature, and culture. Despite ongoing debates and criticisms, Sartre's existentialism continues to resonate with individuals who are grappling with the challenges of living in a world that seems devoid of inherent meaning. His philosophy remains a powerful reminder of the importance of embracing freedom and responsibility in the search for a fulfilling and authentic life. By accepting the fundamental truth of our freedom and the responsibility it entails, we can begin to create lives that are meaningful, authentic, and uniquely our own. Through Sartre's lens, we see the potential for human liberation not through external systems or ideologies, but through the recognition of our own power to choose and to shape our lives according to our own values. We've just journeyed through Sartre's existential universe, where every individual must confront the absurdity of existence, take full responsibility for their freedom, and create their own meaning in a world that doesn't provide any. Sartre's philosophy isn't just academic, it's a challenge to each of us to live authentically, to reject the roles that society imposes on us, and to define our own path, no matter how uncertain or difficult it may be. The real power of Sartre's ideas lies in their call to action. They urge us to embrace our freedom, to confront the responsibility that comes with it, and to make choices that reflect who we truly are. In a world full of distractions, noise, and external pressures, it's easy to forget that we have the power to create our own meaning. But Sartre's existentialism reminds us that this power is not a curse, but a gift, and it's up to us how we use it. As we move through life, it's essential to ask ourselves, are we living authentically? Are we embracing our freedom and taking responsibility for the choices we make? Sartre's legacy is not just about philosophy. It's about living fully in the present, making our own decisions, and shaping the world according to our true selves. It's about finding meaning in a world that offers none and doing so with courage, honesty, and integrity. If you've enjoyed today's deep dive into Sartre's existentialism, please take a moment to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and share it with anyone who might benefit from exploring these powerful ideas. Your support helps keep this channel alive, and if you want to show even more love, consider donating through the Super Thanks feature. It's a great way to support content like this directly. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, remember, the power to shape your own existence is in your hands. Don't let anyone or anything take that away from you. Live authentically, embrace your freedom, and take responsibility for the life you create. Stay curious, stay thoughtful, and keep asking the big questions.